Well, I welcome you all to another session of our speaker series, which is designed to expand our perspectives, challenge our thinking, and spark new insights. So, sometimes we cover topics that are core to economies and markets and our work. And other times, like today, we're going to explore issues that affect our broader world and the communities where we live and work. Today, we welcome Paula Schneider, who's president and CEO of Susan G. Komen, the world's leading nonprofit source of funding in the fight against breast cancer, serving millions of patients in more than 60 countries and helping to reduce the breast cancer mortality rate by 40% since 1989. Before leading Komen, she was a successful CEO, serving most recently as president and CEO of American Apparel. A featured speaker at Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit, Paula also was named one of Los Angeles Business Journal's 500 Most Influential People and garnered the National Association of Women Business Owners Inspiration Award. As CEO of Komen, she's responsible for the strategic and the day-to-day operations of the world's largest breast cancer research portfolio, almost $1 billion in funding to date, and serving millions of women and men in the United States globally. It's also not just business, it's personal with Paula, as she'll tell you. Paula herself is a breast cancer survivor, and her own mother died of metastatic breast cancer. Thank you for joining us today, Paula, and welcome to Bridgewater.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Robyn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's start by hearing about your formative years. What led to your business career and eventually to Komen?
Wow. Well, I won't start from when I was born, but I actually started in the apparel business when I was 25 and started in fashion and progressed through many different iterations and many different businesses. But by I think it was 35 when I was the president of the first company that I ran, and that was a BCBG. So, that was way back when. It was a super fun time. And it was sort of one of those entrepreneurial, very building block time frames of my life. And I then cycled through many different organizations that are fashion related and or private equity related, buying fashion companies. And so I've been in the business sector for many, many years, never actually in charities.
I feel like I was a leading customer of yours at many parts of my life.
Yeah, I can tell you that half of your audience has something that I have designed in your closet.
I'm sure of it. I am sure of it. And now so many, leading a charity that affects so many of us too, as either in our own lives or the lives of our loved ones. So tell me about the transition to Komen.
It was actually a really sort of a interesting story. I was getting an award. I was running Seven for All Mankind. And I was in Miami at the Women in Retail Conference, and I was getting an award for being one of the top female retailers in the country. And that morning I'd had lunch or breakfast with a friend of mine, and I said, God, I just have to do something that is more meaningful to me, because I don't give a rat's ass if I sell one more pair of jeans to Bloomingdale's. I mean, I can and I will do it, but it isn't what really is blowing my hair back now. And literally, I got up to give my speech. It was supposed to be on empowerment. We were supposed to tie it back to retail. I got nothing. So I got up there and I started to talk from the heart about being a breast cancer survivor and how I was the most empowered when I was the least physically powerful when I was going through breast cancer, because your friends and your family and the support system that you have, really kicked into gear for me. And it was so touching. And when you're used to being large and in charge, it's really hard to let go of your power, and you have no choice when you're as sick as I was. So I got done with my speech. I sat down next to the same friend that I had breakfast with that morning. And she said to me, okay, while you were speaking, I got an email from a friend of mine who's a recruiter in Dallas, and they're looking for a new CEO of Komen. What would you think? And I said, yes, I would like to do that. And literally, that was Thursday. Friday, I spoke with my husband about it. Monday, I quit my job without even having an interview or any contact with Komen, because I just decided that if I'm going to interview, I was running a publicly traded company, but if I was going to interview, I had to have an integrity to do it and release myself from that obligation and move on down the road. And it took, several months of interviewing, but, I ended up with the position. So, be careful what you wish for.
Right. And the connection to something so close to you was probably a driver. But also, what was it about Komen and the organization of Komen that attracted you, besides other breast cancer researchers that could have breast cancer organizations that could have grabbed you?
Oh, to be clear, I would not have worked really for anyone. I would never have moved from LA to Dallas for any company other than Komen, because it's so prominent in the field of research and research advocacy, communities, really, really involved in communities. And it was a calling. You can't really say it any other way. The way that it went down, the way that it sort of happened, if, the universe knocks on your head that hard, you got to kind of listen.
That's right. I remember we talked about that when we first met too, of how sometimes things just really connect for you.
Yeah.
And then Komen also is something we all know so well. I mean, the pink ribbon is a part of our national consciousness for as long as that many of us can probably remember. And that was a big part of the origins of Komen, as I understand it. But how's that evolved and developed, and what changes have you been focused on since you joined?
I've been here almost 4 years now, and Komen started with a sister, Nancy Brinker, whose sister, Susan G. Komen, died of breast cancer at 37. And she made a vow to try and, eradicate breast cancer in her lifetime. The challenge with that is she's in her 70s and she's pissed that she has not been able to do that yet, but we're still working on it. It's a huge legacy and we've made great strides, but there's so much more work to do. And I will venture to say that even myself going in and having been a breast cancer survivor and knowing a little bit about the organization, we do so much more than people know. They know the pink ribbon. They know, they know the races and walks that we have, because those are very, very prominent, and you see them around and you look at all the people in pink and go, oh yeah, that must be a Komen walk or a race. But the advocacy work that we do, the research, the cutting edge research, Komen has had its fingerprints over every major breakthrough that's happened in breast cancer for the past 40 years. It's been incredible for me to learn about it. And again, I am not a scientist. I am not a doctor. I am a business person. I've never been in charity, working for a non-for-profit before. So it was so many changes for me to have to learn so much about what happens in especially a health charity. Having had breast cancer does not make you an expert in the subject. It makes you really care about the subject, but it doesn't necessarily make you an expert.
What are some of the biggest differences of running a large company and running a large nonprofit in the way you describe? I can imagine many of them, but are there any examples of a moment that that really struck for you, that you're in a very different world and trying to navigate that?
Well, first of all, if you think about the product that you have to sell, like I was always in a product-driven business where I had a pair of jeans to sell, a dress, or whatever it might be, and you had your distribution channels, et cetera. We sell research, we sell advocacy, we sell the community work, but it's more challenging to figure out ways to market yourself to people, to get them involved in your organization, to get them involved in the community. And I will also say that walking in here, and I've said this to my team many times, 4 years ago now, it was running so slow. I mean, there was so much more emphasis on getting the last pair of jeans out for the end of a quarter than there was on finishing one of the strategies that you had in a not-for-profit world. And I spoke with a lot of my peers, my now peers in this world, and said, what do you think? Is this it just is slower? It's so much slower, especially when you've run publicly traded companies. And now we are kicking. We are moving at the speed of light. I would say that no one in my whole entire organization thinks that this is slow moving now.
I believe it. And would that then also create friction within the team that you had to navigate?
Sure.
And different types of people you had to bring in?
Yeah, I think from all the way from the board on down. I mean,
Right.
because the board was a different board than we have today. And I think we've evolved that in the right direction. I think we have a rock star board. I believe that being very clear on the strategic initiatives that you've got and having a focus on, no more than 5 things, which I've always had. Everything you're doing has to fit on one page, and then you can elaborate on that. But everyone has to understand where you're going so that you pick up the oar and you row together.
That's a good segue into one of the initiatives we recently started here at Bridgewater of working a pilot to actually place some of our Bridgewater people on nonprofit boards, because
Uh-huh.
many people have wanted to be more involved in their community or already have charities and nonprofits and causes that are close and near and dear to their heart. But there's also the experience of leadership and carrying the weight and the burden of an organization versus something else. And is there any advice you have for people at Bridge? I mean, running one of the largest organizations like you, your advice could probably help anybody who's stepping into that, and what the best board member could be.
Yeah, and if not you, then who? Right? Because if you want to get involved, get involved. It's not hard to find ways to get involved, whether it's our charity or other organizations. If you care about something, it is the onus of responsibility of leaders and leadership. The government is not going to do it for you. It's not going to do it for us. We have to take leadership and propel that forward. We have Komen leadership councils, and I'd say there's probably 60 different regions throughout the country, 60 different cities. We have a national board. And these all require leadership, because for us, it takes a village. And when I say it takes a village, we talk to almost 30 million, we touch almost 30 million people a year. We have, huge social media following. We have a community, and we have an onus and a responsibility to take care of that community. And for anyone that wants to get involved, please feel free. You can reach out, and there are ways for you to get involved in a local chapter, which is our community work that we do. And I think it's one of those things that it also gives back to you. They have done all these studies on happiness, and happiness, one of the main covenants of happiness is doing something for the greater good. So whatever it is, if you want to be happier as a human, it's great to be able to give back. I will tell you, I worked in some fabulous places, and I had a great career. I still have a great career. But coming into work every day, and there was a sign when I first walked into my office, there was a sign outside my door that said, "The work we do here saves lives." I mean, what could be better than that?
And the work of Komen has always saved lives, and like I said, drastically changed the mortality rate of breast cancer over the years. One area that's of Komen that I found really interesting and really timely is the work that you've all done and the resources you put towards studying and closing the health equity gap experienced between Black women in America when it comes to breast cancer diagnosis and care.
Yeah.
What led Komen to the subject? And can you speak a little bit about it to our audience, about the things that you've learned and the work you've done?
Yeah, if you're an organization that wants to decrease the deaths in breast cancer, there's about 30% of the people that die needlessly, because our scientific advisory board calls them the stupid deaths, right? Because there's just means that if you got to the care that exists today, they would have lived. And then you have to drill down, right? And you have to figure out, well, who is it affecting? Where is it affecting? Because, you could say that we have decreased the mortality by 40%, which is incredible over the last 40 years. However, there's huge swaths of the population that we have left behind. And in doing so, and you have to be very deliberate about what you're trying to accomplish. So this has not been sort of the flavor of the month for us, or it has not been something that is brand new that we have established in the last year, where it's become the focus of the entire world. But it has been something that has been interwoven within our organization for the past, 10 years, decade, where if you're trying to decrease deaths, Black women are 40% more likely to die on average than white women. So, that's a completely unacceptable statistic. And then there's the why, right? And there's all kinds of whys behind it. So we have delved very deeply into this. We have a 10 cities initiative where the cities have the highest mortality rate or differential between Black women and white women. And in those 10 cities, and these are big cities, they're in LA, Chicago, Atlanta, you name it. There's all kinds of different reasons. So we did a landscape analysis that allowed us to figure out what's the why behind the why, and then how do you make interventions. So we are working very diligently. It's hard work. It's detailed work. It's city by city. There's different, challenges in each city. There's a lot of the same challenges in every city, but figuring out ways that we can create a much more equitable health opportunity for people. Everyone, it shouldn't be where you live determines whether you live.
Right. And so what were some of the conclusions that you found behind these staggering differences in mortality
Well,
rates?
there's always financial toxicity because it's
Right.
super expensive to get sick. I mean, when I got sick, and you can't work, right? So if you can't work, it's a major challenge for you and your family. So if there's the financial toxicity, one of the biggest things that stop women from being able to be in treatment is transportation, because they may not live right near where their hospital is, where they have to go get chemo. And then there's childcare. And then there's deciding whether you're going to pay for your your medication or you're going to feed your family. I mean, there's so many different things that happen, but then there are deeper issues, and there's differences in the way that they look at healthcare. There's differences in different communities. You have to be very of the community to be able to go in and figure out what the opportunities are in each community for interventions. We did a pilot program in Chicago, and where the disparate death rates were, I think they were in the 56% rate at that time. And it was a program over 5 years to try and bring down these rates. And we found that in the south side of Chicago, there was some issues with the quality of care that women were getting in false negatives and mammograms. And that was very specific to one specific area that treated a lot of women, that screened a lot of women. And we found out what the problem was, and then we did a train the trainers, right? So, there's all kinds of interventions that we're doing, and it's really interesting to find the nuances that are happening in each city. And then you need a culturally competent workforce that will help people along. Because then we have proven that if you have patient navigators that look like you, you're much more apt to trust them and to work with them and to get through treatment.
Right. I hear you saying, because there are issues at play here that are so complex of, decades of systemic racism,
Yeah.
as well as individual decisions. And the focus on breaking things down and meeting people where they are. Is there any companies or CEOs that you see who you think are models for tackling social issues in the mission of their work, or how leaders and corporate CEOs can incorporate social inequalities into their company's work?
Yeah, and going back to the CEO as a statesman, right? It is the responsibility of business leaders to take on these initiatives. It seems to be, there's Goldman Sachs just did a $10 billion promise to affect positive change for 1 million Black women. Walgreens has taken on. There's a plethora of people right now and of organizations that have decided that this is going to be what they stand for. And it's a beautiful thing to stand for. So we work with different organizations, and we have come up with all kinds of really interesting ideation together on programmatic opportunities, getting more Black women in the workforce that also help more Black women. We're working on something with a few people that hiring more Black patient navigators and training patient navigators that are of color so that they can go in their communities and help. And the exponential growth of that is if you hire one, they serve 150, people, and then they have over the course of 10 years, it's 1,500 and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it really does affect change, and it affects it in a positive way by helping in the job force and by helping women help other women.
And what are the most important research projects that Komen is focusing on right now, as it relates to breast cancer research for and how that's changed over the years?
Yeah. I will say that over the last 40 years, Komen has had its fingerprints on almost every major breakthrough that's happened in research. You said, you touted the number of $1 billion. We're right at $1 billion that we've invested, which is second only to the U.S. government. It's not enough. It clearly is not enough. We could continue to spend a tremendous amount of money on research that would net positive benefits for women at large. I'm going to tell you about one. There was a study that we did last year, and this is for anyone out there who knows anyone that's going through chemo or who has someone, a friend or themselves that's diagnosed. There was a study called the Taylor X study, And it was headed up by our head of oncology at Stanford, who's our chairman of our scientific advisory board, Dr. George Sledge. And I'm going to give you the layman's terms because I can't do it any other way, and you'll understand it this way.
Better for me.
Yeah, better for everybody. So essentially, if you know, as to whether or not everyone needs chemotherapy, because I'll tell you, chemo is a bitch. You don't not do it if you need it, because the alternative is much worse. But in the scheme of things, if you can avoid it and have the same outcomes, same positive outcomes, then you want to do that. And it used to be, let's say, the bottom 15, cancers is staged and there's different types, et cetera. And at the bottom 15% of women and men that got breast cancer didn't need chemotherapy. They might be able to use immunotherapy or just radiation or, something, lumpectomy, whatever it might be. And then the rest of the, let's say 85%, always had chemo as standard of care. Now it's only the top 15% that have to have chemo no matter what. And then the middle, let's say 40%, it's negotiable depending on the type of care that they need. So there's hundreds of thousands of women that will not have to go through chemotherapy, and their results and their outcomes will be just as good. And it's a 10-year study that we help to fund. So, things like that are very meaningful to almost anyone that has to go through this journey. We're working on, tests for liquid biopsies for cancer to find out, is there a way, if you've had cancer before, to check your blood and see what your recurrence rate will be? What are the things you can do to stop recurrence? Because right now, breast cancer especially, is about 1,000 different diseases. There's, it's not just one disease, which is why it's so hard to cure. But there's still 42,000 women-ish. And when I say women, it is women and men, but men make up about 2%.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't just a woman's disease. But there's about 42,000 people that die every year, and that number has not gone down. The mortality, as the population ages, and there's two things that make you a candidate for breast cancer: being a woman and getting older. That's it. So you should know your family history. And by the way, we're in the middle of COVID. And, we had a little bit of a reprieve. It seems to be amping up again, and people are afraid to go to the doctor. Ladies, put your big girl panties on, go out there, get your screenings, because we are going to see the biggest cancer boom that's happened in years after this, because people are afraid to go get their regular tests. And that means there's going to be later diagnosis with more severe outcomes. So don't let that be you or anyone that you love. So spread the word on that.
Great reminder, and we even found that in our employee population, that by pushing people to make sure you're not skipping your appointments this time, there have been cases that our community has told us of getting their screenings, have caught what they need to catch, and they wouldn't have gone for that push if it wasn't for their friends and family and loved ones who pushed them to do it.
Yep.
One thing you've said to me 2 times now is the only thing that's going to cure breast cancer is money. And so, and it makes a lot of sense. Tell us about the why it takes so much money, and what type of barriers that Komen is facing in that the fundraising is trying to solve.
Well, to invest in drugs that will actually help to cure and or treat people that are having breast cancer or recurrence or living with metastatic disease, it's an incredibly expensive ordeal. It could be upwards of $1 billion to get one drug to market. I think it's very challenging, and there's a lot of stops and starts, but we have about 256 right now, maybe 60 research projects that are ongoing. And during the pandemic and, at the beginning, a year and a few months ago in March, we thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? Will we raise another $1? Or, how are we going to continue on with this? We were able to continue on with all of our grants. And there were a lot of organizations and charities that stopped, which means your scientists stop. And these are people that are working on something, and there's a continuum of motion here. And if you stop it, it becomes very hard to start it up again from a monetary standpoint, whether or not the manpower is still there. They've had to go off and do something else to feed their families. There's all kinds of ramifications. So I do joke, and it's not really a joke, because the only thing that's going to cure cancer is research, and the only thing that's going to keep research going is cash. So cash is king when it comes to research, and there are so many projects that we would like to invest in, and we are working really as hard as we possibly can. And we are in a pandemic. You know, when's the last time you and 5,000 of your friends got together for a walk or a run? Right. So, you know, it's challenging for organizations, especially when they're used to peer-to-peer fundraising.
Right. And I really do hope that for the walks that are planned in Connecticut and New York this fall, that we're able to do it and be part of it and bring a team of people. I got a follow-up question in the chat. I want to encourage the audience to please put it in the chat too, and I'll weave them in or bring them in at the end. But Dana Mooney asks that she's wondering how much collaboration there is across the many organizations researching these cures for breast cancer and donating to so many organizations over the years, whether, and this is true, not just of a cause like breast cancer, this is true of a cause of everything, is it better to pool your money and give to one? Or is there good, or are there people that are effective in silos, or is it something that where there is good collaboration across?
Well, I think it's understanding, first of all, what is your connection to the mission, whatever it is, regardless of what charity it is. You know, if you have lived long enough, you know someone or are very close to someone who has had breast cancer. So we do have a lot of sympathizers in our world, because, you know, it affects 1 in 8 women, and you've all heard that statistic. I will say that, you know, there's opportunity for us. We do collaborate. We collaborate a lot. Our scientific advisory board are the ones, and they're the rock stars, literally the rock stars in breast cancer. Our 2 chairs, one runs Vanderbilt Ingram Cancer Center and one runs Stanford, right? And then we have the rest of the mortals that are godlike, that are at Sloan Kettering and at Dana-Farber, and, you know, you name it. And we have tremendous bench strength in our world of figuring out where we should invest our money, because I can guarantee you it ain't me that's making those decisions, because I would not have the wherewithal of knowledge to make any of those decisions. So we have a very strong peer-to-peer group that tells us where we think we can make the biggest bang for the buck. And so it's a good bet when you're investing with Komen. We only there are other organizations that just do research, and God bless, and I wish them all the best, because for me, this is personal. My mom died of breast cancer. My brother died of prostate. My husband carries the BRCA gene mutation. I have 2 daughters. You know, it's a challenging state. So I'm here for my kids, but for everybody's kids, and figuring out ways that we can collaborate together. And we have done some really great collaborations. We are on a cancer coalitions with a lot of other cancer organizations. We have a really nice partnership with Leukemia Lymphoma Society and us and Walgreens. And we've been working together on some really innovative things that Walgreens has been funding for a number of years with us now. So there's lots of ways that you can decide, but it really has to be something that talks to you.
No, that's great advice. I would love to turn, before I turn over a lot more questions to the audience, more to your background and story, as well as your lessons for us as a leader. You know, everybody listening to this is trying to not just navigate our own careers, but also the organizations that we're part of in many different ways. So anytime we have a distinguished leader into Bridgewater, I'd love to explore your background and your lessons and your advice. So the first question I had was if there's any key strengths of yours that you tend to lean on more than others throughout your career, whether it was across 7 Genes, and which I of course was a customer of, or today at Komen.
I think, you know, the chances of you being the smartest person in the room, if you have several people in the room, is low. And you have to be able to listen. For me, I've always been very humble and gone in and said, okay, especially coming into this, right? And understanding that I am not a scientist. And I was so out of my depth. I remember the first weekend or second weekend, I went to dinner with Dr. George Sledge, who's the head of Stanford Oncology, right? And he says at dinner, listen, would you like me to give you a little tutelage on like all the medical terms and all of that? And I looked at him, I said, okay, George, let me tell you how that's going to roll.
Mhm.
It's like me learning Chinese and then dealing with the top level of the government. Nobody is going to believe me. I have no credibility whatsoever. I'm fashion girl from over here. Why don't I do what I do best, which is bring in great people for all of and make sure that everybody is functioning. We have a strategy. And then you come with me to these meetings because you're the one that's with credibility. And he said, okay, great. And we have done that. And it has been absolutely stellar. He's my pal. He's on my arm. We go together. When it starts, half the conversations I can't even understand. So, I know that. And I knew going in that I wasn't going to be that kind of leader here, especially because I don't have a background in it and it was new to me. And making sure that you understand that you're not the smartest person in the room in most cases. And then lean on those people. Tell them you need your help. If you tell people that you need their help, they will help you.
That's great advice. It's also a good segue into asking about mentors. Mentorship is really important here at Bridgewater, certainly to me personally, among especially the women of Bridgewater. But I'd love to hear if you have any important mentors in your life and how you approach mentorship.
I have two, and they both came from the same place. One is a gentleman by the name of Paul Sharon. And Paul Sharon was the CEO of Liz Claiborne Corp. When I was the president of Laundry by Shelley Siegel. And he and I hit it off. And I ended up getting laid off from that job because they moved it to New York. And that was painful. And I loved it there. And I was so sad and all of that. But we remained friends through all of this. And then when I was at American Apparel, I suggested that he join my board. And he did. And he came on and he was brilliant. He's so tough and he's so hard, but he is so brilliant that whatever he says, I had great respect for. And then there was Angela Arentz, who was also worked with me when I was at Liz Claiborne. And she was my direct boss. And she then went on to Burberry and then went on to Apple. And, she gave me enough rope to, let me put it different because I didn't really hang myself, but she made the padded walls wide enough to where I could bounce off of them, but not get hurt. And it was great because I had a lot of autonomy, and that's how I work best, is understanding. I always think that, the more autonomy that I have, the better. But it was great because her style of leadership was exactly the type of style that I have always tried to emulate.
I like that metaphor of not rope to hang yourself, but walls to bounce off of. Now, a lot of your work and success throughout all parts of your career has dealt with branding and advocacy and messaging and helping people understand the importance of the thing that you're working on. Do you have any skills or advice for individuals and people who are trying to advocate for themselves, their teams, their work?
Do it. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, no one is going to. And sometimes it's really hard to do that. But I would say there's a way to approach that, right? And understand that, again, it goes sort of back to not being the smartest person in the room. You certainly can advocate. And I do find that men advocate much more for themselves than women do. I have found that throughout my career. If you have a job description where there's 10 things on the job description and a man has 2 of those things, he'll apply for the job, and a woman has to have 8 or 9 before she'll even feel comfortable. So I would say, advocate for yourself, be able to talk about the good things you do, but have it based in data. What did you do? What have you done? It's not just a popularity contest, make it a meritocracy. And that takes hard work.
That makes so much sense. And it resonates very much with me, what you're talking about, the women advocating and applying for jobs.
Right.
Now, as somebody who's been widely recognized as a trailblazing leading woman in business, how do you think that's evolved over the course of your career more broadly? What would you say about the trajectory of other women in business, and what still needs to change?
Well, in my personal case, one other than when I first started working, I was the president of Laundry by Shelley Siegel after BCBG, and that was young in my career, and it turned out to be a turnaround, and I was able to successfully turn it around. And then from then on, all of the jobs that were offered to me were turnarounds at some level or another. And I felt like, okay, I can do this. It's hard. It's really hard to do turnarounds, but women will take turnaround jobs because it's what's offered to them. And men might not do that because there's a chance of failure. There's a strong chance of failure. I went into American Apparel, which was the biggest bucket of crazy on the planet, for anyone who doesn't know all of that story. But I went into there, the CEO had just been fired, who actually was the one that wanted me to take his position, and then waged war on me and the company. And, I had picketers in front of my office with my face on a placard. I mean, it went so off the rails, but it was a mission-oriented business for me. I fought for that because I had almost 9,000 people that were going to lose their jobs if that company went down. And those were people that were not skilled in any other field, cutters, sewers, manufacturing, and they would not have gotten jobs around the corner. So it became very personal to me and a very hard fight. But I do think that women take those types of jobs because they're offered to them and are willing to really move forward. I'm very concerned about women in the workforce right now. Because especially when people are deciding to come back into work or not to come back into work, the biggest concern I have is that more men will come back into work where women will opt to work from home. And then wherever leadership is, they're going to have more exposure.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a slide backwards. And I think that bosses need to be very intentional on making sure that they can make FaceTime with, even if it is Zoom time, on moving forward to keep the equity going the way you want, because we've all found in all the statistics and the data that companies that have women as a leadership as well as men do better when there's more equitable split.
Right. And what do you think men or women in power can do to better be allies to women who are trying to forge careers themselves?
There is always mentorship, right? And then there's not only mentorship, but really standing up and helping people along the way and deciding that that's going to be important to you. It has to be intentional. Every one of these things that we do have to be intentional, because if they're not, they just don't happen.
No, it makes sense. I'm going to turn to questions from the audience in just a minute. And so everybody, please, who have questions on any of these topics, please put them in our chat and we will ask them. Paula, I wanted to, just before we wrap this part of the conversation, I wanted to ask sort of the most important priorities that are on your agenda now with Komen, that people who are thinking about how to get involved in breast cancer, that's near and dear to their heart, that they can get involved themselves, that are the things that are front of mind for you.
Yeah, there's always participation in, our runs and walks is going to be really important for us. And there are about 20 of them that are going to be in person this fall, and we're going to do our very best. And the rest of them are virtual, but there's ways to participate and raise money for the cause and join, in a group, whether it's you and your friends that are just walking around your neighborhood, or if you want to go to and you're in a neighborhood where we have one of our walks. Normally majority of you would be in a neighborhood where we would have one of our walks, but
right.
We're edging back into it slowly and finding our level of water. That's the easy way to get involved. There's also, if you are interested in joining one of our Komen leadership councils, there's ways for you to get involved by being an advocate, and it's basically a board, but it's called a leadership council because you don't have governance responsibilities, but you do have there's all kinds of ways that you can get involved there. And then there's advocacy. If you care about what's happening in the bills and the legislation that's happening to help women in healthcare, then you can join our advocates. And this is all on our website. And we have over 100,000 people that have joined our advocacy group. And we have passed about 11 Komen-led state bills in the last 18 months. So there's a lot of power in Women in Pink with Pitchforks. So, join in if you'd like to help us. And these are great opportunities, and it's state by state. And then there are some federal issues as well, keeping safety net programs for underprivileged women and et cetera. So there's lots of ways for us to work together.
Well, thank you. I want to start, that's a good segue to the first audience question I'm going to ask is Jared has asked, how do you prioritize or balance between research or say helping people who simply can't get the care that's available, like using the example you gave earlier?
Yeah. And well, there's a certain percentage of what we try to do is in what we give to research, depending on how much money we bring in every month and every year. And we do have community. The community aspect of it is there will always be research, right? Because there's, again, nothing that cures cancer other than research. But we are one of the only organizations that help people on the ground deal with breast cancer and a diagnosis today. We have a helpline. We have what we call our Komen Health Cloud. And, when you talked about what's new, is using technology to scale. Because especially when we have, in the last year, we went from a federated model to a single incorporation. And we had to do that because of just, streamlining the costs of the organization. And again, I'm a turnaround girl, so I'm very comfortable in that role. It's not the fun one, but the growth one is the fun one. But taking all of ways for us to work together through technology to scale. So we have, if you call our helpline, if someone needs help, we have trained psychosocial workers that will get on the phone. They'll talk to you about it, whether there's a diagnosis or you're worried about your health or whatever it might be. And then if you are diagnosed with breast cancer, where there's a treatment assistance program, which is literally cash that we give people in order to stay in treatment. Then we're asking people to join us in some of our research programs. We have a Komen-led research program, which is a portal that you're allowed to, we're asking people, and this is just coming up right now, to give their genomic and genetic information so that we can give it out to democratize the ability to create research. That information exists today, but it's in silos. If you're MD Anderson, you're not sharing. If you're Sloan Kettering, you're not sharing. Komen is going to democratize that. We're asking patients to give us their information, and they will. And when they do, then we can start our own research projects with the best possible scientists in the world in an open forum, so that because we don't have a reason to want to. The reason people don't give their information out is because it's so valuable. Right. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we democratize it and allow the best scientists to work on programs that will possibly crack the code. And our first research project is, why does cancer metastasize after you've had it once and been no evidence of disease? Why does it come back? Because that's when it kills you.
Right. And how much, all my experiences with cancer are not breast cancer related. But that question, for loved ones in my life, it's like you said, like trying to become our armchair scientist is something that so many of us do when we're faced either with our own cancer diagnosis or for the ones that we love, such that what kind of talk could I give on cancer? It's like none, but you try your best. And so how much does that play into people's, the educational aspects of it, of the reach that a charity like Komen can have?
Yeah, it's huge. We get millions and millions of people that visit our website, not because it's all that much fun and they're not shopping. It's because the number one part of our website is ABC about breast cancer. So it's when someone gets a diagnosis or someone gets a diagnosis and you're trying to get more information. And we are the arbiter of facts, and we are a trust-based organization, right? So we are very trustworthy, and whatever you read on our site, you can pretty much guarantee is the truth. So that's been, and it's all vetted through Harvard Medical School. And, so we have a lot of data points that are very significant to help people along.
I know that feeling of being on that website and trying to understand, and what a great service that is, even in addition to all the research support.
Yeah, better than Dr. Google.
Right. There's something, it's funny because there's something about it. There's something about Komen or Lustgarten Foundation that gives you a different level of comfort than just Googling it yourself on WebMD or
Oh
something.
yeah, that's not the best way to do it. Call Komen if you have you
Call
will
Komen.
get further, you will feel better about it, because there's hope.
That right. Now here another angle for our conversation is wondering, has there been any crossover between your experience in beauty and fashion and your work in cancer research advocacy? For example, finding ways to direct profits from clothing sales to breast cancer research, or pushing for fewer harmful ingredients in the beauty products. Have you personally have a cross of those dimensions beyond just branding?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's two parts to that, right? Is what beauty products and things like that. Like we are not the arbiter. We won't take that on. We may not choose to partner with someone that has carcinogenic, opportunities or products or ingredients in their products, but in general, we try, I think we do a great job of ideating with different organizations to create transformational programs versus just transactional programs. And I'm going to take Walgreens, for instance. It's because with Walgreens, they came to us and we were going to do a pin pad, which means, you go to the end and they ask you, will you give $1 to breast cancer, whatever. We're supporting Susan G. Komen. Super important to do that because that, again, gives money. But what we did was we created a whole comprehensive thing that says, okay, we're going to build this registry, and we're going to use the money that you give us to build this breast cancer registry, the portal that I was just talking about, where women are going to give their genomic and genetic information. And we created a very robust business proposal around it and said, this is what we'd like to do with the money. And they got very involved with it. And, so it was, instead of just saying, okay, here's some dollars that you can go use, we got them as partners. And then now they have a website called Find Care. And when you go on your website, if you can link to our website to talk about breast cancer, or if you have any concerns, there's all kinds of different ways for us to do this. But understanding that I come from the for-profit world, I understand that in order for businesses to want to, most of the time, in order for businesses to want to partner with you, they need something out of it too. So you try to create ideation that helps people, like Walgreens, the more people that they help with cancer, they also have pharmacies, right? They would like people to fill their drugs through their pharmacies.
Right.
But working together with us and LLS and all of the great work that we're doing, I think also drives their business forward. So it's thinking about different ways that you can partner with people that are more transformational than just transactional.
That makes sense. The next question is from Christian, who says, how about navigating when two experts disagree, but are unwilling to call out one another in their differences? For example, I've found that many medical professionals don't like openly disagreeing with their fellow doctors.
And I can't talk to the medical professionals. I can talk to it in my own organization. This is an organization that was born and bred in the South. Everyone is so nice. They don't say what they mean. Bless your heart doesn't really mean bless your heart, just saying. But, and with my organization, it was really interesting coming in there, and a super smart leadership team. And we've added to that leadership team and traded out over the last few years. But in the first, I'd say, year here, no one said what they thought. You could tell by the body language that there was something bugging them, but they didn't say it. And it wasn't the culture to be able to say it. And now, oh my God, we sling it. If there is something that is not, if there is a disagreement or whatever, you air it and you get it done and you work through it, and that's it. And that takes leadership to be able to do, because you have to influence that. So I would be the first one that says, you're making a face. Tell me what you're thinking, or stop making the face, because I can't read your mind. I can't tell you what you want to accomplish here. And then people would step up and say what they were thinking. So there has to be a culture that allows that. And there has to be leadership that implements that, or at least and even instigates it a little bit. Because, I'm known for stirring the pot. because if I see that something's going awry, I want to get it out on the table and I want to work through it. That because otherwise, people don't pick up the oar and row, or if they do, they're going in opposite directions.
That Bridgewater's culture is known for our saying what we think and fighting for what we believe. But you're making the face. Tell me why you're making the face is also a very David McCormick leadership move, at least with me. So I think, it's a sign of great leadership. It makes a lot of sense. Another question that I have probably time for our last question is, and you talk a little bit about this, but are there any major breakthroughs on the horizon for detection or for treatment that you or your medical board at Komen are really excited about that we should know about?
And the answer to that is yes. And there's so many, and there's a lot of mini ones that are going to add up to great things. There's a lot of cross-pollination between prostate cancer, lung cancer, and breast cancer. So if we make a breakthrough in breast cancer, it can also help lung cancer. It can also help prostate cancer. And I will say that having 260 or so active research projects that are going on is, pretty impressive. I will also tell you that we have been, we partner with pharma, and when I first got there, it was like, okay, should we? There's nothing that's going to cure breast cancer other than drugs. And there's nobody that's going to make it other than pharma. So it is interesting to figure out where are you aligned? How are you aligned? I will say that going through and touring all of the labs and the facilities of big pharma and having conversations with them, like what is the velocity of the drugs that have gone through? The technology is moving so fast. And where there used to be, let's say, 1-2 drugs a year that would come out for breast cancer, there's now 6-8, there's more in the pipeline. It is an incredibly important time in research, and it's an incredibly vibrant time in research, barring the slowdown in COVID, right? But in general, there are so many things that are happening. There isn't the ability right now for a blood test for you to be able to take and say, it's not open to the public yet, to find out whether you are more of a chance of recurrence or not. But until they can figure out what they'll do about it, because like myself, would I want to go take that blood test and know, hey, great, you're going to recur. But if I don't know what to do about it, or how to stop it,
right?
I'm not sure that I would pick to choose the day of my death,
Right.
So there's a lot of really interesting studies that are going on, and a lot of breakthrough research that's happening. And it usually comes out 2 times a year based on the big medical conferences is when they make the big announcements and the big reveals. So, it's in February and it's in December.
Well, that is exciting. And, I want to make sure everybody in our audience hears that we will be organizing. Tara Arnold will be sending out the information for Bridgewater. Hopefully we'll be able to be there in person, but to the Hartford Walk on October 23rd. We'd love to have a big Bridgewater showing to be part of both the gathering aspect of the walk as well as the supporting of the walk. And that's part of the beauty of the experience, that it's fundraising and it's community and awareness.
You guys, you could have a very large team. You might even be one of the biggest in the nation, or even number one if you put your minds to it.
Well, we're not for nothing if we're not competitive. So that we are really grateful, Paula, for you joining us today and sharing your work and sharing your wisdom and leadership lessons. We're better off for learning about this today, and for the ways that we also can get involved in and be part of this mission. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It's so appreciated. And for all you ladies out there, get screened. Just saying.
Thank you,
so
Paula.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.